what he would consider the top 10 most historically accurate westerns of all time. Interestingly enough, his number one pick was Tombstone. Brushy Bill Roberts had all the same scars as Billy the Kid. He knew things about the Lincoln County War that nobody could have possibly known unless they had participated in it. And there were 5 people that signed affidavits, saying that Brushy Bill Roberts, and 5 people that knew Billy the Kid, said that Brushy Bill Roberts was Billy the Kid. And then you start digging into it a little bit further and you find out it's all bullshit. Think about before a fist fight. Even people that know how to fight, their hands are shaking. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily because they're afraid or scared, but there's just so much adrenaline's pumping, so much is going on.
All right, greetings, humans. I'm super excited today because today on Dave's Multiverse, where we typically dive into the remote past, we're saddling up for the Wild West with Josh Taylor, host of YouTube channel The Wild West Extravaganza. With over 120,000 subscribers, Josh captivates audiences through detailed research, which was one of my favorite parts. He's got a little bit of wry humor he throws in there, and he's got an excellent voice for storytelling that brings the frontier legends to life. Like, I just watched the recent OK Corral video, and it was like I was watching Tombstone with you talking, but better. So thank you so much, Josh, for joining the show. I'm really excited to have you here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. And we're also got my good friend and collaborator, Mr. Ricardo Calvario, president of the Institute for Natural Philosophy. Say hi, my friend.
Greetings, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you, John, and I'm looking forward to hear about the westerns that I grew up watching with my father. So John Wayne was the hero of the house, yeah. Basically. So in the full 80s and 90s, it was a constant. So I'm excited.
So let's start there because I have this core memory where I think I was about 9 or something, maybe 10. Depends on when Tombstone actually came out. But my parents had got divorced, and they would go visit my dad for like the weekend or a night or whatever. And we had Tombstone on VHS. And me and my 2 older brothers, and my dad, like, watched Tombstone like this. And then, like, as soon as it was done, my dad just stands up and goes, "We're watching that again." And then he rewinds it and then plays it again. And we sat there and we watch it again. So I wanted to ask you, Josh, like, and that wasn't my introduction to Westerns. I grew up like just kind of watching with my dad, having them on TV and stuff in the background. But what was your introduction into Westerns? And like, how did that happen? Was it similar to Ricardo and I watching with your dad, or what?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how it was, watching with my dad growing up. This was even before Tombstone was released. Mm-hmm. The one that was, first of all, we had a constant, it was just John Wayne movies over and over again. Mm. So like the Cowboys, Sons of Katie Elder, all that stuff was constantly being played in my house. And then Lonesome Dove was a big one. If Lonesome Dove was on TV, that's what we were gonna watch. Like, we were gonna stop flipping the channels. That's what was gonna be on until it was over with. So yeah, that was basically my introduction to Westerns, is those old John Wayne movies, Lonesome Dove. A little bit later on, Young Guns came out when I was like in maybe 4th or 5th grade.
Yeah, you're about the same age as me then.
Say. Yeah.
1982?
Sir?
1982? That you're
81. Born? Yeah.
Okay, 81, yeah. So, then that's why I was seeing Young Guns probably at the exact same age you did. So,
matter of fact, I had Young Guns 1 and 2 recorded on VHS, sort of like you said with Tombstone, but it was recorded off of the TV, so it had commercials and all that stuff.
Hilarious.
But, yeah, dude, I would come home from school and just watch Young Guns every day.
Yeah, my brothers and I probably watched Young Guns like 30 times. So no joke. It was one of our favorite. We had a bunch of like movies like that where we'd watch, a million times. So you're watching Westerns with your dad. You're getting introduced to Young Guns and Tombstone, right around when they came out. Then I'm assuming like life happened and you had to like get a real job and stuff like that. So what did that look like for you?
Oh man, it sucked. Work, But no, I come from basically a blue collar background. I mean, I started working in oil and gas when I was 18. I worked for manufacturing jobs, doing everything from operating machines to driving a forklift, and
Uh-huh.
that's what I've always done. That's what I did until, shoot, I guess it's been about 2.5, 3 years now, somewhere around there is when I
Wow.
decided I finally went in full time on the podcast, and that was after the podcast had already been going on for, since it started in 2019. So
Okay. It started in 2019. Then I'm assuming sometime during the pandemic, you were like, let's do this, or?
well, it was a little bit after. Gosh, man, let me think. My daughter was born in 2021. It was after that, so it was 2023, 2024, somewhere around there. I went all in, and I wouldn't recommend anybody doing that. I took a big time gamble. It just
Mm-hmm.
happened to work out for me, but yeah. I mean, I quit my job because I had to watch my daughter in the mornings,
Mm-hmm.
but it was also at the same time, you know what? I bet if I focus on this podcast, I can make a career out of it. And luckily, after about a couple of months, that's what ended up happening.
Yeah. So was there some fear and anxiety related to that decision?
Yeah, big time, man. I would wake up in a cold sweat, like, what am I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a job. I was an idiot for quitting my job. How are you going to quit a job to become a podcaster?
Right. Right.
And I was freaking out, like, mentally. On the inside, I was going crazy. But luckily it all worked out, but I would not, like I said, I would not recommend anybody doing that.
So you just went all full on, all
Mhm.
your energy and extra time into, making the podcast like better and making that kind of thing. So talk to us a little bit about the evolution of the podcast, like what your first concept of it looked like,
Mhm.
and how that like rolled into, what you're doing now.
Yeah, so, first and foremost, I was a big fan of podcasts in general. I listen to podcasts,
Hmm.
and, I was working nights, from I think it was 11 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. And my favorite podcast at the time was it still is my favorite podcast. It's called Time Suck,
Huh.
hosted by Dan Cummins.
Um,
Greatest podcast ever made. But even before I found that, it was always in the back of my mind, like, I'd like to start a podcast one day. And then I found Time Suck, and it was the exact format that I was looking for. I thought everything about it was perfect. I was like, man, this is the type of podcast I want to make. One day he did an episode where all he did was talk about how he started his podcast and his background. And I was so inspired. I got off work that morning, went home. I made a list of all the stuff I like talking about. And I wish I
mhm.
still had that list now. If I wrote down 20 things, 17 of them probably were Old West history adjacent. So that's
Mhm.
kind of how I didn't know anything about podcasting other than I needed a niche of some sort. I needed like
Right.
a certain topic to talk about. So that's how I came up with the topic. But I didn't take it seriously. I didn't think anybody was going to listen.
Mhm.
Like those first, I don't even know, maybe first 50, even 100 episodes are very, very, very bad. But I
Sounds like
wasn't
my old ones.
trying. I wasn't putting any effort into it. It was very, very cringy. Wasn't
Okay.
until later I kind of started putting more effort into it.
Did you do some research? Like, obviously, you use that guy as an example. What's
Mhm.
Time Suck about?
He covers everything from like cults to true crime to history, just basically whatever he feels like talking about. He'll pick a topic and talk about it for 2 or 3 hours. And the
Nice.
the host, he's a stand-up comedian, so it's entertaining. It's not just boring like a lecture format or anything like that.
Got it. So you were inspired by him
Mhm.
and in his format, and so how did you start applying? Like, what was it about his format that you really liked that you wanted to use in your episodes?
Well, it was just him. So, a lot of podcasts are interview-based podcasts, or a
Mm-hmm.
lot of podcasts will have, two or three different people talking. I like the
Mm-hmm.
idea of just one guy telling a
Mm-hmm.
story, and that's what it
Mm-hmm.
was. There's like no sound beds, there were
Mm-hmm.
no extra fluff. It was just this dude turn on the microphone, he'd start talking and talk about it. That's it. I just like the simplicity of it, I guess.
Yeah, I like both, but I really do like somebody who does a bunch of research and like
Mhm.
sits down there and covers deep dives into topics. So there's a few that I listen to in that capacity as well. One of the things that I think makes your show good is you've got an outstanding voice and cadence for delivering storytelling. Did you ever consider yourself a storyteller before?
Never, never. I never, it would have never dawned on me before. I'm very quiet, man. I don't go around talking to people. If I'm not recording an episode or talking to my immediate family, I'm not going to say 3 words all day long, unless I'm talking to myself. Like I'm very introverted. I'm not like a social butterfly. The idea of getting on a stage and talking in front of people scares the hell out of me. Even just doing this, like I'm nervous just talking to y'all, you know. So the idea of being like a storyteller, no, it never dawned on me, ever.
Well, I appreciate you doing this, even though it's outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And did you ever get comments about what I just said of your voice and stuff like that? Because I think it's really quite compelling.
I get them now that I'm doing the podcast. In the past, that's another thing. I never thought anything about my voice either. And I started doing the podcast, and people would say like, "Oh, you've got a radio voice," or this or that. Or I know before I started showing my face on YouTube, a lot of people thought I was black. Apparently, I don't know
That's
why.
funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
I've never
That-
really gotten any comments on my voice before I started doing this.
Yeah, but sometimes it's because the voice resonates real well with what microphones capture.
Yeah, yeah.
So in
Mhm.
person, the voice might be good, but it doesn't. It's not that warmth. But you have that warmth as I hear it.
All
So
right.
it's like a voice that microphones love to
Yeah.
Definitely.
bring out. Yeah.
Definitely.
I wish I felt that way, man. When I hear it, all I hear is too bassy. That makes sense. Like, yeah, you probably, I don't know if you go through and do like any post edit and try to like balance out the audio, but I've always felt like my voice is just too it's a little too bassy. So when I'm editing, what I try to do is remove a lot of that bass.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. What if history isn't linear? What if civilizations rise and fall again and again? Discover the shocking truth in Deja Vu. Has Everything Already Been? By my friend Alexander Cheshkovich. Grab your copy now on Amazon. The link is in the description below. And subscribe to Dave's Multiverse on YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble today so you don't miss a thing. I like it, and it'd be interesting to hear a version that wasn't. It was just straight up your voice, you know.
That's what you're hearing right now, homeboy.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So there's a bunch of things I want to talk about today. The first, I guess, place we'll start, and this was what we were something we were talking about before we went started recording, and I think it's a good place to start. Is how do you define a Western? And I don't mean how do you specifically define a Western, but it seems like there's a lot of different people who define Westerns in different ways. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So like with my show, I talk about real life people and events from the Old West or the Wild West. And I have a very loose definition. It's just basically the entirety of the 19th century and stuff that happened west of the Mississippi River in North America. But I wouldn't even consider that to be a perfect definition of what a Western would be, like a Western movie set in that time period in that locale. Because you have a lot of people like I think about Tom Horn. He was a range detective in the Old West. He ended up getting executed for killing a 14-year-old boy. Whew. And his execution, all that stuff occurred in the 20th century. It was I want to say 1907, 1909, somewhere around there, whenever he was executed. So you still had some Wild West stuff going down even into the 1900s. One thing that I love talking about, a lot of people, it kind of blows their minds. There were still Apaches living in northern Mexico that were raiding into the 1920s.
Wow.
Right?
I did not know that. Did you, Ricardo?
More through watching television and then checking if they were correct than by actually knowing it, but from the movies itself.
And then we were talking earlier, and you mentioned like other people define westerns, you know, in a much broader term. You mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, and that's, you know, sort of like my question that I struggle with a lot is what is a Western? Is Quigley Down Under a Western? Because it was filmed in, or I don't know where it was filmed, but it takes place in Australia. I say it's a Western, you know, even though it just didn't even take place in the United States. And I know, Ricardo, you were talking about this a little bit off camera. Samurai movies, you know, could those be considered Westerns? I've heard people say samurai movies and gangster movies are also Westerns. I don't know how you define it, man. Like No Country for Old Men or Hell or High Water. I love both those movies. I personally wouldn't consider them to be Westerns, but a lot of people do.
Why?
In that case, we would also have to consider Walker, the Texas Ranger, as a Western.
That's probably the greatest Western ever made.
I used to binge that so hard when it was on, just because it was like you didn't have a whole lot of options on TV back then, and you know, just the format of good guys versus bad guys and all that stuff, and that's one of the things that I like that you do is you do a lot of, you know, sort of myth. I don't know if debunking is the right word, but clarifying and stuff like that. And a lot of it is sort of centered around this good guy versus bad guy idea that's generally a little bit more muddy than people think, right?
Oh yeah, that's life though, right? I mean, nobody's very, very rarely is somebody like fully evil or fully good. Like we're all just humans, and I don't idolize necessarily any of the people I talk about. Like I'm not just one of these guys that's like, oh, this guy's my hero, and you better not say anything bad about him, or else I'll get you. You know, these were just humans, just like everybody else. They just lived in a very fascinating time period.
Yeah,
in my opinion, but they were still fully human. You know.
Yeah, and it totally. And I think about how some figures really got a I don't know, a media boost or whatever, so that like everyone knows about them, like Billy the Kid and Wyatt Earp and stuff like that. And then, but there's a whole bunch of fascinating characters and figures that you've dug into as well that aren't necessarily as famous as everyone knows, like Bloody Bill and all that stuff. And your series on him was fantastic. It's a long series. What was the process of, and why did you decide to make such a long series when it came to Bloody Bill Anderson?
So Bloody Bill, I'm actually planning on redoing that. That's a little bit of an older one, and I really didn't have any thought. Even now, I don't really have a thought process. It's just whatever I feel like covering, you know. So it just happened to be, well, let's talk about Bloody Bill Anderson. Now I wish I'd have researched that one a little bit better, but I'm also going to be covering William Quantrell soon.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to do like a series on both of them together.
Okay, that'd be great. That'd be great. If you want more on Bloody Bill would be fantastic for me. And so in the debunking and stuff like that, like for example, the truth about Billy the Kid's fake death and stuff like that, was there like, first of all, like you mentioned it earlier, people idolize these people, right? So when you make a video like that, do you get like feedback of people being mad that you change it? And also, what was sort of the biggest, I don't know, finding from, you know, your research into Billy the Kid and the truth behind how he died and all that stuff?
Oh, well, to answer your first question, people always get mad. Like if it's just everybody.
So true.
There's
and the bigger your audience, the more people get mad.
It's just an ingrained belief in something. And when you point out, well, maybe that's not actually the way things went down. You know, people sometimes, you know, you mentioned Bloody Bill Anderson. The reason that video got so many views on YouTube, in my opinion, The reason why I think the Bloody Bill Anderson video got a lot of attention was people hate watching it because they were
Mm,
angry that I wasn't painting him as like some courageous hero of the South or whatever.
mm.
But I'll get pushback even on somebody like Billy the Kid, to the point that people have emailed me and asked me, "Why do you hate Billy the Kid?" Like, I don't hate Billy the Kid. I love talking about Billy the Kid. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. But I mean, he wasn't a superhuman. He wasn't perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's like this ideal person. Billy the Kid was very young when he was killed. He probably wasn't even 21 years old yet.
Wow.
You know, he packed a lot of living in those 20 years, but we never got to see Billy the grown man. We never saw Billy the 40-year-old, right? So people have this like idealized version of Billy the Kid in their mind where he never ages. And we all like
Ah.
to see a little bit of ourselves in Billy the Kid. So if you say any little thing that kind of goes against that narrative, well, you must hate Billy the Kid, which is obviously not the case.
Right.
And these persons that you're talking about, for were they? I think you touched this a little bit. Were they people motivated by good intentions? Were they deliberately have no respect for life, or were they just normal reacting to day-to-day situations, and it evolved to what they
Like the people
eventually
we talk
become?
about on the show.
Yeah, like these two examples that you gave now.
Oh yeah,
Like,
well, like yeah. So Billy the Kid, I mean, yeah, he was. A lot of it would be, I guess, reacting. You know, he was orphaned at a young age. He didn't really have any parental guidance as he got to become a teenager. He was on his own, slid into a life of crime, and yeah, if it wasn't for the Lincoln County War, he would have lived a long life. If even after the Lincoln County War, if he would have just got the hell out of New Mexico and started over somewhere like most of his friends did, he'd have probably lived a long life. But he stuck around, and he just took too long to get out of the territory. He ended up dead.
Mm.
Bloody Bill Anderson, I'd say he's a little bit more on the psychopath side, probably. Um, as to how much of that comes from being involved in a war, a very bloody war, it's hard to say. But a lot of those Missouri guerrillas, you know, they started off probably like that, like you said, with reacting to the times and the circumstances. I mean, if you lived in the South during the Civil War, you were going to enlist with the Confederate Army. If you lived in the North during the Civil War, you were going to enlist with the Union Army. And there were some exceptions, but for the most part, they were probably started out doing what they thought was right. And in the case of Bloody Bill Anderson, I'd say the war probably changed a lot of those guys for the negative.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue into one of the topics I wanted to cover. It wasn't called PTSD. It was called a bunch of different things back then. But that video was especially interesting to me because I work with war veterans with PTSD now is my profession. And I'm also a war veteran who like lives with PTSD. And so it's very interesting because you're talking about the Civil War, that effect on people. Large increases in alcohol consumption, large increases in domestic violence, that kind of thing. And I, and then you cited like four different studies about, maybe it was one study about four different places where it gave sort of the murder rate for those places,
Mhm.
and that comparably speaking to a place like Chicago, it was much higher. In some cases, you had a chance of less than 1 in 100 to be murdered as an adult. So what? And then people often say that the whole idea of violence in the Wild West was sort of a Hollywood elaboration, but I think you debunked that, and with just that night, you just presenting that information to all of us and what it looked like. And so why choose that as a topic? And what was the biggest takeaway? Did PTSD have an effect on the violence in the Old West?
Yeah, so that was actually in response to a listener question. A guy emailed me and asked me, like, I'd love to hear you talk about PTSD in the Old West, how much of an influence. And I want to say he specifically asked how much of an influence did the Civil War have on the violence out west? You know, a lot of those guys, when the war was over, a lot of them did head west.
Mm-hmm.
And with the increased violence in the West, could the trauma, you know, received during the war have caused that violence? It was an interesting, and you know, that was a very short episode, so I didn't spend a ton of time on the topic. I found it interesting because number one, you know, most people actually did not head west after the Civil War. Most of the people just went back to wherever they were living prior to the war. You know, whether it was Georgia or Maine or you pick it. Turns out, it looks like a lot of the violence that was occurring in the West came down to a few different things. I'm trying to remember now. One of them was there was just a lack of social norms in the West at that time. So you didn't have a lot of the social structures you had back East, like churches, family life. There weren't a lot of women. So it was just a bunch of dudes doing dude stuff.
I saw the picture of them dance, a bunch of dudes like dancing and stuff.
Yeah. And there was a lot of alcohol flowing. So, and a lot of these guys were on the younger side. So even now, you know, your chances of dying young drastically decrease once you hit about 25. So we do stupid stuff whenever we're 20, 21 years old.
True story.
You go into an environment that has little to no law enforcement, and whiskey's flowing like the river, and you know, there's going to be violence. And there wasn't a lot of stuff to hold them back. You know, like I said, their families were living somewhere else. And, you know, keep in mind the studies that I cited in that episode, a lot of those were studies where they looked into more of your boomtown type environments like Tombstone or Deadwood, some of the gold mining towns like in California and Nevada. At the same time, there were normal little house on the prairie towns that were perfectly peaceful and there weren't gunfights. And, you know, kind of to touch on what you said a minute ago, I see both sides of the argument. The people that say, well, the Old West wasn't that violent, I know what they're saying. They're basically saying it wasn't like a Western movie, which is totally correct. You know, there were not shootings every day. Matter of fact, if you go back and you look at some of those studies, a boomtown in the West with an extremely high homicide rate means that 3 people were killed that year. But the population is so low that many homicides is actually a pretty big deal. Whereas if that many homicides were to occur in New York City, it wouldn't be a blip on the radar because the population is so high. So it was all relative to, you know, homicides rates per 100,000 population. But yeah, my takeaway from it was I'm sure PTSD played a role. It had to have. But I don't think it was the main cause for the violence out west. I think that was more so caused by a lack of proper law enforcement and not the social ties they had back east. And you know, one thing I wish I had mentioned in that episode, I didn't mention it because it was it was specifically responding to a listener who asked me about the Civil War. But I kind of feel like most people back in those days were walking around with a good deal of PTSD. You know, well, not just the soldiers, the veterans. But, you know, you had a very high child mortality rate. So, you know, you talk about your average woman, she's already had 3 dead children, you know.
And that gives you PTSD.
It has to. It has to. Just being around death at a very young age, or you think about all the smallpox outbreaks, cholera, the different plague type events that happen, and just seeing entire families decimated and people dying. And, you know, think about the Native Americans. Their entire world was completely upended and changed during the same period. Nothing was the same. If you were born in 1820 and you lived until the year 1900 and you were let's say you were a member of the Blackfeet tribe, your entire way of life was disappeared in your lifetime, gone. Half of your family, if not more. You know, there were some tribes that were almost completely wiped out during these periods, and they didn't know what did they call PTSD.
Right.
Something that you might know how to answer. So the cities were not that big, were not that much business. You could have a barber shop, a grocery, a physician,
a bank maybe,
and a hotel, and the bar. Maybe bars, there were several. But what were the profession of these people that are then we see retracted in what we believe it's a Western. What do they do actually? They were outlaws. They live from robbery. They were people that had normal jobs somewhere around the city. Who are these people?
You know, I would say most of the people I talk about on my show, when we're talking about like, probably most of them are going to be either in some capacity of law enforcement or in some capacity of as a professional criminal, right? Now,
it's the two sides then.
right?
Okay.
And these sides were very interchangeable. A lot of lawmen got their start as outlaws and died as outlaws, and a lot of outlaws became respectable lawmen later on in life. Now, and you know, if I'm getting a little bit earlier, you know, I love talking about the fur trade era, the mountain men like Jim Bridger and Kit Carson and all those guys. Those guys, their profession for about 2 decades or so was literally trapping beaver. That's what they did for a living. That's how they earned their living. They went out to the Rocky Mountains and they'd set traps in streams. They'd catch beaver and they'd sell the plues, they called them, their hides, for money or for provisions. But yeah, other than that, the vast majority of people that I talk about are either outlaws or police officers, and doesn't necessarily mean that the police officers were the good guys and the outlaws were the bad guys. But as far as the profession, how they earn their living, and you know, like I recently did a series on Doc Holliday. His profession was gambling. That he started off as a dentist. That didn't work out too well when you have tuberculosis.
Right.
But he was a gambler. But if you really look at what he was doing, he had a lot of regular jobs where he was working in these saloons or gambling establishments as a dealer. So he would be a faro dealer or something like that. And then he would supplement his income by fleecing other people across the poker table. And some of them were just, you know, con artists, you know.
You have this recent movie, I can't remember the name.
American Primeval?
No, when he's attacked by the bear and
the Revenant.
Yeah.
The Revenant.
Yeah.
In the Revenant, we see it's not a matter of lawmen and criminals. It's a matter of daily life, of envies, of accumulated stress between people that then escalate in situations of high stress, right? Into and escalate, and people that had that tendency to do the bad thing but always refrain in that situation eventually go beyond anything that they could believe they could do, and they commit those terrible acts, right? And it becomes a Western.
Right, yeah.
Right.
And you know so the Revenant is about a guy named Hugh Glass, a real life guy. That's the character that Leonardo DiCaprio played.
Thank you very much.
That Hugh Glass was a fur trapper. So him.
That's what reminded me. You talked about them. That's what reminded me.
So that entire expedition he was on, they were actually heading to the Rocky Mountains to establish trading posts and to trap for beaver. Now that real life mauling, I want to say, occurred in western South Dakota, which you don't really think about that area as being full of grizzly bears nowadays. But back in those days, the grizzly bears were on the Great Plains, and they really didn't head up into the mountains proper until civilization sort of pressured them into the mountains. But those guys, that was their job, was literally just to trap for fur. But there were no doctors, there were no stores. They were once they headed west, they were completely on their own. There was nobody coming to save them, so they were on their own essentially. And they in the end, it's interesting because those fur trappers assimilated almost, in some cases, almost fully with the native tribes. And you really didn't see that later on when we get into like guys like Wyatt Earp or Billy the Kid, you know, stuff like that. But in those early days, they were the minority in the West, on the frontier. The guys that look like me, you're a stranger in a strange land. So their only chance for survival was to assimilate with these tribes. They had to learn the languages. They had to learn their culture. They had to, in a lot of cases, they married into the tribes. Some of them had children with the tribes. They became almost members of the tribes, you know.
And they knew how to survive in that environment. So learning from them in that respect would be
absolutely
very beneficial.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Good question, Ricardo, because like, you know, there wasn't a lot of professions to have, right? There's maybe 5 or 6 professions, and then everyone else is like kind of fending for themselves. One thing that I think is important that you mentioned was the age of these people, very young men. And they say that our frontal cortex doesn't fully develop until the age of 28. And I saw that in the military, right? I was like that, like I remember we went to training for basic training and then for my medic school, and we were basically locked up doing training for, I don't know, 5 months, and then finally they let us go on the weekend. And didn't the whiskey flow and the girls and the stupid decisions and some dudes getting arrested and stuff like that. And so I think that's a huge factor. I also really like what you said about the social structures, because in the East Coast you had these established law systems, lawyers, like you said, churches that promoted family structures and things like that. So that puts that violence over there into a lot of context. One thing I wanted to ask as well that you touched on was the blurred line between lawmakers and outlaws, and then there was this the profession that you mentioned that we haven't talked about, which was the bounty hunter. Talk about the role of the bounty hunter in the Old West, and maybe some like famous ones that I don't know if you've done any videos on them or whatever.
Sure. Well, if you don't mind me asking before I get to that, who'd you serve with?
I was in the U.S. Army, the 113th Cavalry, which is an Iowa Army National Guard unit.
Yeah, okay.
In 2004 to 2012.
You do your medic training in San Antonio?
Sure did. Yeah,
okay,
sure did. Yeah,
and my dad was a medic in Vietnam, so.
Did he do his training at Fort Sam Houston?
Yeah.
Man, they've been doing that since
Long
then.
time.
It used to be just the Army that did it there. Now they send the Air Force medics there, and the corpsmen there, which is for the Navy. And the Army, and maybe someone else.
Well, as soon as they saw that it worked on you, they thought, well, we're going to work on everybody.
For sure. And I think it just logistics wise, it made more sense. And they were basically like kind of teaching us all the same thing. So I think back in your dad's day, you'd get designated either like a hospital medic or a combat medic.
Yeah.
And nowadays they put everyone through both types of training. Was your dad, which was your dad, a combat medic?
Yeah, and he'll be the first to tell you he didn't receive very much training at all. I mean, this would have been in 1967, I guess. So as soon as he got word that he was drafted. As soon as he didn't like choose his MOS or anything.
Right.
But as soon as he found out, okay, he was going to go to medic school, he was like, okay, great, I don't have to be a grunt. And then, of course, once he gets to Vietnam, that's what he was with 25th Infantry.
Okay.
So they were out. They were out in the field to the point that they're in the humid southeastern Asia, to the point that their fatigues were rotting off of them, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, But to answer your question about bounty hunters. So we all have this great idea of a guy that just goes from town to town and he collects these wanted posters, and his job is to hunt down these bad guys, and that's how he earns a living. That
through bad photographs.
Right? Yeah.
Or drawings.
And that basically never happened. So they're 99% of the time, the people that were collecting bounties, they were lawmen themselves. Okay, so if anybody has ever seen the movie True Grit, either version with John Wayne or the remake, that Rooster Cogburn was a deputy U.S. Marshal, and he was working out of Fort Smith, Arkansas, and he would routinely head west into what was at that time called Indian Territory, with a stack full of warrants to collect for the courts in Arkansas, in Fort Smith. And that's what the majority of bounty hunters were. They were deputy sheriffs, they were deputy U.S. Marshals. Sometimes they would collect bounties in their official capacity. Sometimes it was just a side gig. They needed some. There were a lot of guys in the West that were. A guy would be a town marshal in Nebraska, and he would simultaneously hold a commission as a deputy U.S. Marshal. That way, he had jurisdiction outside of his town. Or if you were a deputy sheriff in whatever Bexar County, Texas, and you also held a deputy's commission with the U.S. Marshal Service, you now had jurisdiction outside of your home county. So
interesting.
And Fort Smith, Arkansas gets a lot of the glory just because of movies like True Grit, but there was also a pretty large contingent in Texas, a little town called Paris, Texas. It's right there on the border between what's now Oklahoma, and those guys were doing basically the same thing like you see in True Grit. They were heading north into Indian Territory, coming back with the bad guys. I was only able to find one guy and I can't even remember his name right now off the top of my head. One guy that it looks like a good deal of his career was spent just being a bounty hunter. But at the same time, I also think he did a lot of work. So you think about modern day bounty hunters, right? They work for bail bondsmen for the most part, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was sort of the same situation with this guy. Like I said, I'm blanking on his name now. But
no big deal.
So the idea of just one lone guy traveling from town to town, collecting bounties, ripping them off a tree, and never really happened.
That is so fascinating, because like you see that well, I don't know what the word is. That concept shows up everywhere. And it's like this, dark, tall, like figure, gritty, showing up, and it's like, oh shit, it's the bounty hunter, and I love that. But I have this I want to believe poster that I bring up on every one of my episodes because I know I want to believe stuff, but I actually I enjoy when somebody is like, hey, actually, that's not actually how it happened but that is really fascinating. So you're only able to find like one guy that was like traditional, like not even traditional, this mythical bounty hunter that we're talking about. That is interesting, man. So we mentioned, so Lincoln County War is a big one. Young Guns 1 and 2 is how I got sort of introduced to that. You mentioned earlier, and I wanted to like comically correct you that we never got to see old man Billy the Kid because we did in Young Guns 2. So tell us about Young Guns and, historical accuracy there that you can apply, as well as, what did you think about, the whole like additional story, Young Guns 2, because I really enjoyed that movie as well, especially the music in both of them. Sorry. Both.
With Young Guns is always going to be nostalgic for me. Same. So I just have a hard time critiquing it negatively, but in my opinion, they still hold up. Both of those movies are still great. From a historical standpoint, they're far from perfect. But then again, it's a movie for entertainment. I don't think they really commit any like unforgivable sins. But just off the top of my head, Mr. Tunstall was not an old man. John Tunstall, Billy the Kid's mentor, right? In Young Guns, he was
he English?
Yes, he was English, but he was only 24 when he was killed.
Wow.
So some of the regulators were older than he was, And another little bit of a misconception, the what we now think of the Lincoln County regulators, those were not just his employees. Though there were two factions in Lincoln County at that time. There was the McSween Tunstall faction, and then there was the House, which would come to be sort of known as the Murphy Dolan faction. That's another thing. What is it? At the end of spoiler alert, but at the end of Young Guns 1, Billy the Kid shoots and kills L.G. Murphy. Never happened. Matter of fact, Murphy, he wasn't even in Lincoln County at that time. He was already done. He was dying. I believe it was he had a liver disease, I think. But he died in bed. So he wasn't killed. Doc Scarlock didn't have an Asian girlfriend that anybody's aware of. That was just made up for the movie. But other than that, man, I'd say the movies are pretty solid. The great gunfight at Blazer's Mill where they take on Buckshot Roberts. That was a real gunfight. The end scene there in Young Guns 1, the Battle of Lincoln. Billy the Kid didn't jump out in a trunk and come out guns blazing like that. But in real life, the house really was on fire. They really were. The army was there. Now, the army did not take part in the fight, so the army didn't shoot anybody, but the army was there. And they really did have to run out of that burning building, guns blazing. It was at nighttime, but they did have to make their getaway under a hell of fire.
But the gunfights could never be that long because how many bullets could they carry?
Yeah, well, I mean, this, gosh, man, I want to say it was the day before all the way into that night. I'm not sure how many shots were fired. But yeah, with the guys inside the building, I'm thinking probably for the most part, they were just hunkered down. The guys outside of the building, all they had to do was run to the general store and buy more ammo.
Buy more rounds.
Yeah. But yeah, you make a very solid point because especially if you were out in the middle of nowhere. And you know how movies are though. You never see them reload. It's just 6-shooter shoots like 20 rounds and just like nowadays, somebody will have a magazine with about 1,000 bullets in it, right?
After seeing probably 80% of all the Technicolor movies, and some even in black and white and so on, probably my favorite Western is called My Name is Nobody with Terence Hill and Henry Fonda.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like a celebration of Western.
Yeah.
Because all the new guy wants is for the nearly to be too old to continue the life of a shooter, and he wants him to go into a glorious ending because he read all the chronicles. Because apparently there are people writing chronicles about these shootings, about the feats of these people and so on, and he collected all of that. And so he wanted to have a final fight with the bunch of 400. So one guy alone against 400 people as he's going to his retirement. He already has a boat ticket to go to Europe to manage to live his rest of years in peace. And that links then to Terence Hill starting make what we call spaghetti westerns.
Spaghetti westerns, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is another link with Japanese culture because in samurai movies there are also this kind of spaghetti samurai that have Japanese names, of course, but they are also divided in slash and slash when there's all fighting and so on. Like Western movies also fall more or less into these small categories. And after seeing all that, I really appreciate seeing, and I still do from time to time, watch movies like Trinita with Spencer and Terence Hill. Especially they have 2 or 3 that are amongst my favorites, because it gives some kind of relief. It takes the reality of the severity of the conditions that they live, that the Revenant showed us so well. Because you also don't, if you go and see Burt Reynolds or John Wayne, you don't see them having a very hardship of living. It's like they are comfortable on going into the nothingness with a pot of coffee and what are they eating? What are they cooking? How long does it last? Right? So they have to be constantly hunting.
That's an interesting concept about wanting to live long enough to retire and not be a shooter. I think that probably was, I don't know if Josh, if you can comment on this, but probably was like sort of the mindset of like, I got to get old enough so that I'm not involved in this anymore. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, and most people were. It's just like nowadays, most people weren't just going around gunning people down left or right.
Right.
There's a few cases like guys like John Wesley Hardin or Clay Allison. These guys were crazy, and they would kill you at the drop of a hat. Most people, it was just we talked about professions earlier. John Wesley Hardin, he was a cattle guy. Clay Allison, they trailed cattle, they had ranches, they did that type of work, but they were also psychotic killers a lot of the times, But for the majority of people, it was a lawman who had to kill somebody in the course of doing his job. And there was, I don't know. I'm trying to think now if how much of that had to do with like getting old and man, I got to find something else to do because I'm getting too damn old to be chasing people. But what that makes me think of is going back to the mountain men. You take guys like Hugh Glass when the Revenant, when that happened, that you're looking at 1822, the early 1820s. Jim Bridger he came west when he was very young as a teenager. Okay. By the time he's in his 60s, he's scouting for the army on the Great Plains in the lead up to during the Red Cloud's War. Okay. So he went from when you're young, you can rough it like that, right? He had to have been in pain in his latter years scouting for the army, and he had to have been thinking like, gosh, man, I got to figure out another way to earn a living. And eventually, his eyesight drove him to Missouri, which he went blind. But there was another guy, James Beckworth, another mountain man. Same thing, he came west as a young man. By the end of his life, he was scouting for the army in his 60s on the Great Plains. And,
man, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
That hits hard for me because of the army and living a hard life as a young man and into my 30s doing martial arts and things like that and weightlifting and stuff. Like now I have back pain and I was trying to find a job that I didn't have to, I could work from home. And thank goodness I did because I wasn't trying to go sit in a car and drive through traffic and stuff like that. Because the reality is, depending on the lifestyle you lived, you get to a certain point where you're like, I'm not young anymore. So these guys that, like you mentioned, that were doing that stuff into their 60s is wild. Coming back to the Lincoln County War, there's a good example. Is Buckshot Roberts? Was he an old guy? Was he a real guy? Did he really kill? What's his name? Who did he kill in that fight? Was it Dick Brewer? Yeah. Okay. Was he a real guy? Did he really kill Dick Brewer? And was he old?
He was a real person. From what I understand, he was never known as Buckshot. That came later in life. His name was Andrew Roberts.
Okay.
Probably that was his name. There's a lot of mystery regarding his early life. There's a lot of sort of anecdotal stories about him either being a Texas Ranger or getting into a gunfight with Texas Rangers. At some point, he was shot with buckshot, hence the nickname. And he couldn't lift his arm above his shoulder, so he kind of shot from the hip, sort of like what you see in Young Guns. But he was a real guy. There's also various stories about how that gunfight came to be. The one that seems to have the more of a ring of truth, that seems to be more evidence based, is that he had been somewhat aligned with the Murphy Dolan faction, but he was trying to get out of the territory. He didn't want any part of the war, and it was just bad luck that he ran into the regulators there at Blazer's Mill.
Okay,
and he didn't have any backup in him. Remember these guys were still deputized at this point. Billy the Kid, Dick Brewer, those guys, they were all holding badges. They were going out there to supposedly arrest the people that had killed Tunstall.
Right.
And they blamed Roberts. They lumped him in with everybody else, which he probably was associated with the guys that killed Tunstall. But he wasn't going to let them arrest him because he knew he would just end up dead on the way to jail. So he fought back. And, it's it doesn't make a lot of sense to our modern ears, but according to a guy that was there, gosh dang, I'm drawing George W. Poe. George Coe, sorry. There was a George Poe, but Lincoln County regulator George W. Poe, he wrote a book later in life called Frontier Fighter. And his account of that battle is pretty good because Coe's cousin knew Roberts. He went out and tried to talk to him, say, hey, just lay down your guns and surrender. And he wasn't having it. He wouldn't surrender. Finally, Charlie Bowdry and some more Lincoln County regulators come outside and tell him to throw his hands up. And his response is, not much, Marianne. Sounds weird, but not much. I recently talked about Huckleberry, Like,
Yeah,
what
you
what
saw
did Doc
that.
Holliday mean when he said, "I'm your Huckleberry"? From what I understand, and my friend James Townsend actually sent me something the other day about this. You can find the phrase "not much" in older literature, and it's sort of a sarcastic, dismissive thing to say when you're telling somebody not a chance in hell, right? And the Mary Ann part, he was basically calling them a bunch of little girls. So this guy was
Ah,
outnumbered, 12 to 1,
ah.
and they told him to lay down his arms, and he's like, "Screw you, let's get it on." And that's what ended up happening. As far as his age, I don't think he was that old as he appears in the movie. I want to say he was probably in his early 40s, which in those days is like
It's old.
being 60,
Yeah,
nowadays.
yeah.
He did kill Dick Brewer. Um, he didn't make his final stand in an outhouse like they show in Young Guns. It was actually a building he was inside of, and the rifle he used to kill Dick Brewer, he pulled off the wall. So he did not have that gun with him. It's not a gun he brought with him.
Wow.
But he wounded several of the regulators. George, the guy I mentioned a second ago, George Coe, he lost his finger. Boom, shot right off. One of the guys took
What a
a bullet.
badass.
Yeah, one of the guys took a bullet in the belt. Like he just happened the belt buckle saved his life. But he forded up in this room there at the mill. Dick Brewer snuck around the back, and he was trying to sort of get a beat on him, and Roberts plugged him right between the eyes.
Whew.
And then he died of his. And then at that point, the regulators they skinned out, and he died of his wounds either later on that day or the following day.
So in Young Guns, it seems to happen, like over the course of a couple hours, but that
Yeah.
standoff was likely a couple days, right? A day or two?
No, that would have been one day. That all happened in the same day like that. It's probably a couple hours. Yeah.
Okay, but then Buckshot Roberts died later, like
Yeah,
of his
yeah, he died
wounds.
later. Yeah, he died after they had already left.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned Huckleberry. Would you want to comment on that as well? Like what he was meaning by that, or what he was
Oh
actually trying to
yeah,
say?
there seems to be like there's always people arguing like, did he say I'm your Huckleberry? And then there's this other group of people. There's a rumor that he actually said I'm your Hucklebearer. It's Huckleberry, 100%. The Huckleberry thing, I'm sorry, the Hucklebearer thing. That's just the internet rumor. But basically, by saying I'm your Huckleberry, all that meant was I'm the right person for the job. Like pick
Mhm.
me, I'm the person you're looking for.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you find the truth on that stuff? Like what sources are you looking at and like stuff? Because you're gonna have to you're probably looking at competing stories. This guy said this guy said that, and that's really all you have to work with.
Well, I just look at what are the primary sources? What is the evidence for something? And there has to be for something to have happened, we have to have evidence that shows that it happened, right? So for specifically Huckleberry, you can find I think somebody found like over 500 uses of some variation of the phrase "I'm your Huckleberry" in the 19th century in newspapers, in poems, in advertisements. It was a known thing, it was "I'm your Huckleberry" or "I'll be your Huckleberry," something along those lines. You can actually we have tangible evidence. I can send you links to newspaper.com where you can actually read the old newspapers and see where somebody used
Yeah, I think
"I'm your
there's music
Huckleberry."
from that time speaking with the word
hmm
Huckleberry.
the same cannot be said about Hucklebearer. So one of the contentions is that Huckles were the casket handles were called Huckles, and that therefore a Hucklebearer was synonymous with pallbearer. But there's no evidence that was ever the case. You can find no obituaries, no newspapers, nothing that has the word Hucklebearer in it anywhere. It just doesn't exist. Therefore, I can conclude that it's a you can't find it prior to the late 1990s after the movie Tombstone was released. So it
Interesting.
was just somebody came up with it one day as their way of they didn't understand what he meant when he said Huckleberry. So they just made up a story about pallbearers, and it caught on like lightning. One of the things I mentioned in my most recent episode was I used to tell people that Mr. Rogers was a sniper in Vietnam, and that he wore all of his sweaters to cover up his tattoos. Total bullshit story. It's not the case. But somebody told me that, and I thought it sounded cool, so I told other people that.
Right.
So we,
Right.
as humans, we like to share stories. We're not all sitting around on our phones all day, like, oh, let me fact check you. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Mm-hmm.
just as human beings, we share stories that we find interesting. It just so happens, unfortunately, the Huckleberry story is built on a myth.
Right. So when you make like when you make mistakes like in a video and then people correct you, like the row versus raw
Oh yeah.
thing.
Not necessarily. I love it when people correct me because
Mhm.
I wanna say things the right way, you know? I do sort of play around with it a little bit because, man, there's a lot of words that I mess up all the time.
Well, we all say things in our head that
Yeah,
we don't
yeah.
know. Yeah, and then we realize, oh shit, I was saying that wrong the whole
The
time.
one
So,
that gets me is locations, man. Locations drive me crazy because I'll give you, for instance, John C. Fremont. His name is
mhm.
spelled F-R-E with an acute accent, M-O-N-T. Um, he
Huh.
was an explorer. I talked a lot about him during the Kit Carson series I did.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's a lot of places named after John Fremont. Based on the spelling of his name, I thought it was Fremont. And especially with the acute angle above the E, it should be pronounced as an A, right? Well,
Uh-huh.
that's how I said his name, and then I had a ton of people correcting me. No, it's Fremont. It's Fremont. Well, yeah, if you go to Fremont, California, it's spelled Fremont, but they
Mm-hmm.
say it's Fremont. Fremont High School, Fremont.
Mm-hmm.
All the
Mm-hmm.
places named after John C. Fremont say Fremont, even though his name is spelled Fremont, right? So it's very
Mm.
frustrating because I would have no way of knowing that unless I actually went to that place. If you ever go to Houston, there's a street called Kirkendall. There's no R in that word. Okay, Kirkendall is not spelled Kirkendall. I can assure you, but you would never know that unless you had seen a movie or you actually live there. So there's a lot of places I'll get wrong, a lot of names I'll get wrong, um, and people like to give me a hard time about it sometimes. So that's just my way of having fun with it. But I do like it when people correct me because I want to know if I'm wrong. You know, if I'm getting something wrong, let me know.
Yeah, it's true. There really is no way to know unless you say it out loud, and then somebody
Yeah.
goes, "Hey." When you say they give you a hard time, like some people are like might be mad about it, but most people are just like correcting you or being
Yeah,
funny about it.
most people are doing it just like any of us would do, you know. If we were talking in a casual conversation, you said something wrong, like somebody I is very near and dear with me to me. What did they say recently? They said placate instead of placate, right? Like, oh,
Ah.
actually, it's placate, which, but you don't ever say like, hey, idiot, it's placate, moron.
Yeah,
So every now and then I'll get that, but for
they
the
do
most
on the
part,
internet. They do on
yeah,
the
yeah,
internet,
yeah,
not in real life. So there's
right.
a
For the most
inner
part, it's just people being helpful.
Sure.
internet gangsters.
Oh, a lot of tough guys on the internet.
I have a question for you. You spoke about the guy couldn't lift his arm, so he's shot from the hip.
Buckshot
Mhm.
Roberts.
Now, I don't know if this changed, but until recently, the record was by a middle-aged man with a pronunciated belly, and he had the record of the fastest shooter. And
Hmm.
he can shoot 2 rounds, and we only hear one shot.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are the 2 holes, so we know he shot twice, but he can only
Hmm.
hear one shot, and he shots from the hip, and he defends that cowboys doing this is a myth.
Hmm.
That in shootouts they would shoot from the hips because this would take too long to point.
Hmm.
Is this a reality, or people just shoot? They didn't actually were that accurate in shooting.
Well, I'm assuming the guy you're talking about probably does like the cowboy action shooting where they're
It's
using
it's
like
it's 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 not
revolvers.
that competition of you have to
Hmm.
shoot with different weapons.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He is just considered to be extremely quick,
Okay.
and what I saw, the video that I saw is a documentary that included the Guinness judges. It's not a Guinness,
Hmm.
but they took the opportunity and did all at the same time.
Hmm.
Uh, and he today the guy must be around his 70
Mhm.
years old or something like that. But he defended that thinking that they take and do this, it's
Mhm.
absolutely ridiculous because it would take too long. But I thinking of all you said,
Mhm.
these people were actually practicing shooting all day long, right? They
Mhm.
weren't that accurate in hitting the other person, right?
Mhm.
And those two people front to front shooting themselves, as you said, is not as common as we are made to believe.
Yeah.
So have you looked into the
I
at
think
to what point they shot from the hip, as this fellow says, or
yeah, a lot of people shot from the hip, but uh, how's the best way to say this? I think the shooting skills of your average gunfighter from the old west is highly overrated.
exactly?
The majority of these gunfights were extremely close in range, right? These guys were just a couple of feet away from each other, and they would still empty their guns and miss each other. That
Mm-hmm.
happened all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just mentioned covering Doc Holliday.
Mm-hmm.
Doc Holliday missed what he was shooting at a lot. All these guys missed what they were shooting at a lot. They were drunk. They were in a lot of cases they were probably scared, or if they weren't scared, they were probably shaking with anger and rage. And it wasn't a lot of emphasis put on like your skill back in those days. A lot of these guys, it was on the job training. You know what I mean? Like, you know, uh,
You learn as you go.
yeah, you learn how you go. Like they didn't go to even the former soldiers. What did they teach them? They didn't necessarily have a basic training back in those days. They taught them a couple of drills. They put a rifle in their hands and they sent them to war. There was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of cases in Vietnam. I read this thing about how they would find people whose rifles were not fired, dead guys, and guys would go
Mm.
through a firefight and not fire the rifle. So I think there's so many factors at play. In the shooting world, there is such a thing known as like reflexive shooting. I've even heard people of using like the reflexive shooting when it comes to like archery. Um, but at the same time, there's people that devote their entire lives to properly shooting a firearm. They're also really good. And I'm sure it was the same way back in the old west. There were some people that were probably pretty good firing from the hip, and there were other guys who would take their time and aim the right way, and they would shoot what they were hitting at on the first or second try, whereas the guy that was firing from the hip was just emptying his gun.
Yeah.
Mm. So that's interesting to me.
Sorry to say,
You
it
go ahead.
just remind me that Pulp Fiction scene when the guy shots all rounds and misses every single one of them at that close range.
So true, so true. I the Tombstone portrays Doc Holliday as sort of drunk gambler that everyone was scared of. That like was the fastest gun in the West. What's the reality there?
I mean, it depends who you ask. There's some contemporary evidence you can find where people were legitimately afraid of the guy in his heyday, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have other sources like Bat Masterson. Bat
Mhm.
Masterson knew Doc Holliday well, and he said that I can't remember the exact quote, but basically along the lines that without his gun, he couldn't whip a 15-year-old boy in I think he said called it a go as you please fight. And he also
Right.
said that most people that weren't afraid of him did not think highly of him.
Mm.
So that tells me that there were definitely people that were afraid of him, but there were, you know, Doc did drink a lot, especially as his tuberculosis progressed. There was a period. If you watch the movie Tombstone, remember how Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp and that posse they go after the cowboys, right? Towards
Mm-hmm.
the end, that's when they kill Curly Bill and all that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doc was doing
After
pretty
the gunfight at the OK Corral.
right.
Yeah.
There's a good idea, a train of thought that says, okay, that got Doc out of the smoky saloons. That
Mm-hmm.
got him into the country, the clean air. He was being active,
Mm-hmm.
and he was actually doing pretty good health wise there.
Mm.
You got to think with a disease like tuberculosis, and you're earning your living inside these smoky bars and saloons, it couldn't have been good
Right.
for him. And then later in life, he ended up moving to Leadville, Colorado, very, very high elevation. That
Mm.
also was not good for his lungs.
Wow.
And so at that point, he was really self-medicating with a lot of alcohol and a lot of laudanum.
Opium.
Yeah.
Laudanum. Yeah, which is an opioid, right?
Mhm.
Wow, interesting. I'm going to read a quick quote from one of your recent video about the gunfight at the OK Corral.
Okay.
Says, according to Kate Elder, Doc Holliday went back to his hotel room and wept. After the fight, Doc came in, sat down on the side of the bed, and cried and said, "Oh, this is awful, just awful." Kate asked, "Are you hurt?" He said, "No, I'm not." He pulled up his shirt. There was just a pale red streak about 2 inches long across his hip where the bullet had grazed him. You said, "I've got no firsthand experience in this, but they say the shock of a firefight doesn't really set in until afterwards. That's when you start thinking about how close you came to going under, and all the emotions came well up for Doc. As for Doc, he had also just killed a man. I know we'd like to envision our heroes as being made of stone, but I think Clint Eastwood said it best in Unforgiven." I don't have the quote after that. Yeah. When did your no? Yeah. I don't have the quote for that. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is I don't talk about this in any detail, but that's true. You nailed that as far as like what it sets in afterwards. As far as like once your adrenaline dump happens and stuff like that. And they don't show that in the movie because they're trying to keep Doc Holliday as this sort of mythical character, right? But I just wanted to, tell you that you nailed that. You said you don't have any personal experience in it, but you nailed that. So good job.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and that's just, I've got family members and friends who have been in those situations. So I've heard stuff. I've read a lot of books about, real, modern day soldiers experiences and everything. And yeah, it's, I one thing I've always heard is that like in the thick of a battle, your training sort of takes over, and after that,
or it doesn't, or you freeze. Yeah, but yeah, that's what happens. Yeah,
and then afterwards, you have time to think about it finally, and yeah, I mean the closest I've ever been is like work related accidents, stuff like that. But never anything on that scale.
Even a fist fight, like, afterwards, like, it's like, oh shit, what just happened? And like, there's just a bunch of emotion.
Well, think about before a fist fight. Even people that know how to fight, their hands are shaking. Not necessarily because they're afraid or scared, but there's just so much adrenaline's pumping, so much is going on. I've seen people, very tough guys, get so angry. There's tears coming out of their eyes, before you get into a fight. Yeah. So it's just this idea of just a cool hand Luke over there, just never not getting swayed by anything. It just doesn't seem that's Hollywood stuff,
Yeah, and I really appreciated that part of the video that you pointed that out. Now that we're here on the subject of the not the Lincoln County War, but the gunfight at the OK Corral, and that whole situation, the Cowboys versus the Earps and stuff like that. How well did Tombstone do as far as being historically accurate, like in as well as like character traits of these guys and that kind of thing?
So I have this buddy named David Lambert. Y'all definitely need to get him on the show if you like talking about like the historical accuracy of Westerns. But me and him, I recorded an episode with him not too long ago about this guy he's like Rain Man when it comes to Westerns. He knows everything about every Western ever made. He's seen it. He knows everything about it, front and backwards. He's read about them. And I wanted to have him on to talk about what he would consider the top 10 most historically accurate Westerns of all time. And I ended up not being able to use it for an episode because the audio was screwed up. It was my fault. But it was a great conversation. And interestingly enough, his number one pick was Tombstone.
Wow.
And a lot of that was based on, their period appropriate attire, what they were wearing, that type of stuff. Obviously Tombstone is going to have historical inaccuracies just like any other movie.
Like it didn't actually happen at the OK Corral. It happened kind of around the corner, right?
And, sort of like what I said about Tunstall from Young Guns 1. Marshall White in that Curly Bill shoots him. He was like 30. He wasn't an old man like they show in Tombstone. But that aside,
Casting problem.
Sorry, yeah. But what David Lambert was telling me is, from his what he knows about, this guy's like an expert when it comes to like the stuff they would have worn, even a lot of cases the language they would have used. That was his number one pick for accuracy.
There was a part in that episode that I literally just watched this morning, describing how they gave, I think it was not Wyatt, his older brother, blanking on his name, gave Doc, Virgil, gave Doc a shotgun to put under his long coat, and then Doc gave him his cane, and then you see it in the famous like scene where they're walking.
Yeah.
That's exactly that was exactly right. That was I found that so cool.
Yeah, one of the things I think with any of these sort of deals, any of these movies, they have to compress it all into a 90-minute format, right?
Yeah.
So like with Young Guns, the Lincoln County War, it would take me 3 hours just to explain the Lincoln County War, much
the politics
much less show all
behind
the events. And I think it's the same way in Tombstone. The gunfight at the OK Corral has its origins in a stagecoach robbery. Right, there was a stagecoach that was robbed outside of Tombstone on its way to Benson. It's known as the Benson Stage Holdup. It was a failed robbery attempt, but the bad guys did kill the driver and one of the passengers. And Doc Holliday was suspected as being in on that robbery. He most likely was not, but he was friends with one of the guys that were. Okay, in an effort, sort of like to gain some glory and to clear Doc's name, Wyatt Earp had a secret meeting with Clanton. What the heck was his first name? Ike Clanton.
Ike, yeah.
And
did they call him Old Man Ike?
Well, no, that was his father. His dad was Old Man Clanton.
Oh, okay, got it.
Ike Clanton and Frank McLaury. Wyatt Earp met with these two guys, and they worked out a deal. Hey, you turn on your buddies. You tell me where they're at. The guys that tried to rob the stagecoach, and I'm going to give you 100% of the reward money. They agreed to the deal. The guys were eventually killed before they had a chance to be arrested. But Ike Clanton was paranoid after that because he knew if the other cowboys found out he had been talking to Wyatt in such a way, they would kill him. So he was always going back and forth with the Earp brothers. Like you told on me, didn't you? Like that kind of stuff. And eventually he drug in Doc Holliday's name and told Wyatt Earp, hey, I know you're talking about this because Doc Holliday told me that you told him, and Doc Holliday comes back to town. He finds out about it. He confronts Ike. They have a big confrontation in a saloon. The following day is when the gunfight at the OK Corral goes down.
Interesting. And they don't even mention that in Tombstone.
Right. And that's what I say. There's so much you just can't fit into a 90-minute movie. But I thought they did a good job. I mean, there's really no historical evidence that the Cowboys wore those red sashes. That kind of like surprises people sometimes. But other than that, I thought it was a pretty accurate movie.
Did Ike really punk out in the middle of the fight and Wyatt Earp throw him to the side kind of thing?
He may not have. I need to look into this further. I'm going to look into this further when I do the series on Wyatt Earp. I don't know that Ike Clanton even had a firearm on him whenever that gunfight broke out.
And he was hungover as fuck, too.
Yeah, he was probably still drunk. I don't even think he was hungover, man. He was still high on all the festivities from the night before. But, he was arrested that morning. Virgil Earp arrested Ike Clanton that morning for carrying a concealed weapon. It was a big no-no. And Ike paid his fine. He gets out. He goes directly to a gun store to get a new gun. And the guy at the gun store refused to sell to him because he was all bruised up from wherever Virgil had smacked him across the head. And he was clearly drunk still. So I don't know. He may not have even been armed. But yeah, per eyewitnesses, he did run up to Wyatt and grab a hold of him and say, don't shoot, I'm unarmed. And Wyatt told him to either commence the fighting or to get the hell out. And he punked out again a few months later whenever Wyatt was killing Frank Stillwell. There's that scene in Tombstone where Wyatt Earp says, you called down the thunder, well, now you have it,
Yeah.
After he killed Stillwell, and then Ike Clanton's like, no, don't shoot me, don't shoot me. According to Wyatt Earp, he was running towards both of them. Clanton ended up running the other direction, and Stillwell tried to grab his shotgun, and Wyatt just gave him both barrels.
That's so fascinating. That the sort of end scene where Doc Holliday, like what's the name of the main cowboy that they were all scared of, and Wyatt Earp was going to have to go fight him, and then Doc Holliday. Johnny Ringo.
Yeah.
Was Johnny Ringo a real guy?
Yes, the Johnny Ringo was absolutely a real guy. This is where the reality kind of parts ways with the movie.
Okay.
They make Johnny Ringo out to be like this, almost like an extremely educated guy. I don't believe there's any evidence that he was educated or spoke like Latin or anything like that.
Philosophy and stuff like that.
Right. He he had been part of I think it was the Mason County War in Texas. He was involved in, possibly killed one person during that conflict. Then he headed west and got involved with the Cochise County Cowboys. But yeah, as far as either Doc Holliday or Wyatt Earp killing him, in the movie they show it's Doc Holliday that kills him. Definitely not the case. Doc and Wyatt, they were both in Colorado at the time Johnny Ringo was killed.
Bummer. That's the best scene in the
movie. I think he killed himself. There's a lot of evidence supporting that. He was on one hell of a bender, man. He had been drinking for days, and he had actually been predicting his death, like talking about he wasn't long for the world. The last person that ever saw Johnny Ringo alive, I believe it was Billy Breckenridge, who you also get to see in Tombstone. And he just said he was reeling in the saddle. He had a jug full of whiskey. He offered Billy the whiskey, and it was scalding hot. That's how hot it was outside. And then a day or two later, his body was found. But it was interesting because he didn't have his boots on. His cartridge belt was on upside down, and he was missing a portion of his scalp. Not that he was scalped like you see, like Native American scalped him. It was almost like somebody had cut it off as like sort of a trophy, And so there is a lot of mystery around Johnny Ringo's death. I think all the clues are there that he killed himself. I think his father also, when they were headed west in a wagon train, supposedly there was an accident on the wagon and his father accidentally shot himself with a shotgun. Is that really what happened, or did his father really kill himself? They say a lot of times it sort of runs. I don't know. But there was another guy named Buckskin Frank Leslie who later took credit for killing Johnny Ringo. He may have killed him. Wyatt Earp at one point said that he killed Johnny Ringo. Total lie. I don't know why he would lie about that, but he wasn't even in Arizona. Like I said, he was in Colorado at the time Ringo was killed. I think he killed himself, but the verdict is still out.
And how do you justify the boots and the scalp?
Okay, so I think he stopped to take a nap, sleep it off. Yeah, he took his boots off, put them on his horse wasn't there. His horse had run off, so his boots were found on his horse. He had hung his boots on his horse, so the scorpions and stuff wouldn't crawl inside of him.
Yeah.
While he's asleep, the horse runs away. I think he woke up with a killer headache, thirsty, his tongue swollen, he's hungover like a motherfucker, and he had just reached the end of his rope, man. That's what I think. Horse was gone. He had actually taken an old shirt and wrapped it around his feet like he had gone walking to look for his horse, as a sort of a way to protect his feet. So there was something happened that day. As to what happened to that little portion of his scalp, I don't know.
He might have fallen. If he was drunk, he might have fallen on a rock.
He possibly might have, yeah.
Could have been anything.
Maybe pulled his own hair out prior to that. I don't know.
So why do you think that, I suppose it's kind of obvious, but why they changed the death of Johnny Ringo for the end of the movie? I guess it's for cinematic purposes, right?
Well, you can't have him live, right? Like it's bad enough. Like they had no you never get to see Wyatt Earp kill Ike Clanton either, So they couldn't also and Johnny Ringo, he's sort of like the he's like the baddest of the baddest when it comes to the Cowboys. So I guess they had to sort of tie up the loose ends. It's just, it's storytelling technique.
Yeah, yeah. It bumps me out a little bit, but at the same time, I appreciate knowing the truth. Another thing that you said today that bummed me out a little bit was, well, starting with the Karate Kid and then with Young Guns, kind of started my young boy thing for Asian women, and it's a little bit of a bummer that Doc didn't have an Asian girlfriend, because I loved that girl when I was a kid.
I'm not sure why they decided to add that into the movie, but where Billy the Kid spent a good chunk of his younger life at, where his mother died, was Silver City, New Mexico.
Okay.
And there was, from what I understand, a pretty strong Asian population in Silver City. Whether or not there was also that population in Lincoln, that I don't know. But yeah, Doc had his wife was Hispanic. I'm not aware of there being any sort of, and once again, like I said earlier, Murphy wasn't even there at that time. He was I want to say somewhere up near Santa Fe.
Okay, let's talk about Kate Elder a little bit. So she was, where did she come from, and how did Doc and her get together, and how accurate was that portrayal of them being sort of these two outlaws on the run and stuff like that?
Well, I don't know a ton about Kate Elder. Her real name was her last name was Horoni or Hornery. It is different spellings.
I see a flogging coming up.
Yeah, another flogging here. I need my class ready. She was originally from Hungary. Her parents died at an early age. She was basically orphaned, and she started working as a prostitute in St. Louis. She says that she and Doc Holliday initially met in St. Louis right around the same time that he graduated from dental school. She's the only source on that, though. So I don't know if they actually met in St. Louis, Missouri, or if it was later on in Texas, but they were definitely together a couple of years later when Doc was in Texas at Fort Griffin, Texas, working as a gambler. And yeah, she followed him to Arizona. She did not like Wyatt Earp whatsoever. That's why, a lot of the stuff she says about, she kind of makes the Earp boys to be out to be villains. But they were no saints either, but
sure,
she really didn't like them because she was competing with them for Doc Holliday's affections. She claimed that she and Doc were actually married. There's no evidence that a ceremony actually occurred. They lived together a lot. The events you see in Tombstone, they were on and off again. That stage robbery I mentioned earlier that Doc was suspected of taking part in. He and Kate actually got into a fight, and she ran and told the sheriff that he had confessed to being part of the robbery. He never did. That was just her way of getting back at him. So in the events that you kind of see unfolding in the movie Tombstone, once they're actually in Tombstone, during that period, Kate and Doc were on and off again. She was actually spending a lot of time in the town of Globe, Arizona. And sometimes he would go up there to visit her. Sometimes she would come to Tombstone to visit him. And then once the vendetta ride sort of happened and they went off chasing after Curly Bill and the Cowboys, that may have been the last time they ever saw each other. She did claim to have been by his side when he died, but there's not a lot of corroboration on a lot of her claims. So it's really hard to take it at face value if there's no way to corroborate what she said.
Right.
Why would they be inclined to believe that he would be on that robbery? Did something?
Because he was good friends with a guy that was. So there was a guy named Leonard. I'm drawing a blank on his first name. He and Doc had been friends when they lived in Las Vegas, New Mexico. Las Vegas, New Mexico. And Leonard was also tuberculosis. He was suffering from tuberculosis. He was a dope fiend. He had shot a police officer in Las Vegas, New Mexico. The day of the robbery, Doc Holliday actually paid him a visit at his house. So there was a little bit of suspicious activities there, right? Like, okay, this guy takes part in this hold up. You saw him that very same day as the robbery, and you're also good friends with the guy. You know, so it was just some legitimate suspicion. I I think there may be a slim chance that Doc Holliday was involved. However, he was cleared by Wyatt Earp would later say that Doc had never been involved with any type of holdups whatsoever. So it's sort of a he said she said type situation. There's no hard evidence putting Holliday there other than
So he
the
never was
speculation.
caught committing a crime before that,
Right.
or was he?
Now, one of the guys was caught and he admitted to who his partner. He named all of his partners and he never named Doc Holliday.
No, I mean, has Doc Holliday ever committed a crime before that, or caught
Uh,
committing a crime before
yeah,
that?
yeah. There's some indication he may have been involved in a little bit of swindling or con artist type stuff, just fleecing people for money. He possibly murdered two people in Georgia before he ever came west. There's a lot of speculation on why he came west to begin with. Was it because of tuberculosis? Was it because of he unrequited love? Or there's another story. He was at a watering hole one day, and there were some former slaves swimming at the watering hole. I guess he didn't want to share the watering hole with people of color. He told them to leave. They refused to leave, so he got a shotgun and killed two of them. Is it true? We don't know. There, just like with a lot of Kate's claims, there's no corroboration. There's no mention of this killing in any of the newspapers or anything like that. And with a lot of these guys, that's what it all comes down to, man. I mean, we know very little about Doc Holliday. We know very little about Billy the Kid. All these people, there's so much mystery surrounding their lives, and there's so much legend that's been added after the fact through books and movies. So it's really hard to say this happened or this didn't happen.
It's a mishmash.
We have to say, well, what do the primary sources say? Is there any corroboration? I hear stories all the time, man. People email me all the time and say, my great grandfather's cousin was Jesse James, and therefore X, Y, and Z is true. And I'm like, man, that's a cool story, and I believe you. That story's been passed down through your family, but that's just not how history works. We have to have some type of evidence, because I can find somebody who has a story that's going to say the complete opposite, right?
Sure.
But yeah, as far as the evidence, yeah, there's no evidence that he was involved in that in the holdup. He wasn't a bank robber. He wasn't a horse thief. He didn't do a lot of your traditional outlaw activities. To answer your question, like, did he commit other crimes? He was arrested a lot. Almost all of his arrests had to do with either gambling charges or carrying a firearm within city limits. But yeah, he wasn't like a Jesse James or a Butch Cassidy type. It would have been not characteristic for him to rob a stagecoach.
Sure, that was my question. And since you talk about that, sorry, Dave.
You're good. No, you're good.
With the slaves,
I'm trying to look something up anyway.
That led me back to Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
Were there black people as sheriffs on those remote times, or it's just a parody?
I'm sure there were. Sheriff would be a different story, because that would be an elected official. It probably there was. Just with the mentality of the time, I'd find it very hard to believe that a majority white population would elect a black dude as the sheriff back in those days. There may have been. One of the more notable would be Bass Reeves. So Bass Reeves, he was a black guy. He was a deputy U.S. Marshal, which is not an elected position.
Sure, I think the film depicts a marshal too, because he's placed on that city. They didn't elect him. He's placed
I don't remember his role in Blazing Saddles, but yeah, to answer your question, there were black law officials, absolutely.
It might be interesting to do a video on the the place of African Americans in the Old West. Is that something you'd be like interested in doing, or is there even enough information on that?
Yeah, so I've covered Bass Reeves. I've covered a few other people like Stagecoach Mary Fields and Britt Johnson and James Beckworth. One thing I really want to look into next is more of like the traditional cowboys, the black cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy named Nate Love. It was like a really prolific cowboy back in those days, and he had a lot of run-ins with some pretty famous people like Billy the Kid. And I'm gonna definitely be covering him soon. And there's a few things I really want to look into. Like, there's one thing you hear a lot is, well, what is it? Some people will say, well, 1/3 of all cowboys were black. I'd like to look into that source, kind of see how true that is. Not something I've ever really dived into. But yeah, that'll be an interesting episode to do for sure.
Yeah, I didn't really thought about it too hard till Ricardo brought it up.
Mm-hmm.
So back to Lincoln County and Young Guns and all that stuff and Billy the Kid. Like, you're saying that there's just not a whole lot of information on Billy the Kid. Some of what I think what makes these people like stand out in their fame might be cool nicknames like Billy the Kid. Did they call her Big Nose Kate? Was that a thing?
I don't know if anybody ever called her that, or if that was something that happened later on. I don't even know if she had a big nose.
I hadn't heard
one
that
of the
before.
theories is she would stick her nose into other people's business, like she was nosy, and that may be where the name came from. Billy the Kid wasn't called Billy the Kid until like 7 or 8 months before he was killed.
Interesting. That's when they started putting the wanted signs up and stuff, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah. I know there was one newspaper in particular that referred to him as Billy the Kid, and he kind of took off after that. Kid Antrim, the Kid is what people would call him,
Kid Antrim.
Mm-hmm.
What's that from? Antrim.
So his stepfather was William Antrim.
Okay.
So Billy the Kid's name was Henry McCarty. Whether Henry was his first name or middle name, I have no idea. His mother married a guy named William Antrim after they had already settled in New Mexico. And Billy had a brother named Joseph. Joseph did change his name to Joseph Antrim. I'm assuming Billy also started going by Henry Antrim. After his mother died, the stepfather moved to Arizona. Billy got in a little trouble in Silver City. He headed to Arizona to link back up with his stepfather, at which point he was going by William Antrim, which is his stepfather's name. So he sort of took that on as an alias. By the time he comes back to New Mexico, he's going by William H. Bonney. So there was just different names for him. Some people called him Kid Antrim. Some people called him Billy Bonney, Some people called him Henry.
Fascinating. The recent video about the DNA evidence and potentially identifying, I didn't get a chance to watch it. Would you? Because I think it's your most recent video, isn't it? Could you talk a little bit about that and what were your findings?
So with somebody like Billy the Kid, or there's a lot of different your more famous outlaws of the Old West. There's always going to be people saying they didn't die when history tells us they died. Not just Billy the Kid, Jesse James. There's a lot of people, even to this day, that believe that Jesse James lived to be an old man. Earlier, we talked about Bloody Bill Anderson. There's a lot of people that think Bloody Bill lived to be an old man. Butch Cassidy, Billy the Kid. So with Billy the Kid in particular, and I just realized I didn't answer your question you asked earlier about the old man in Young Guns 2. But for anybody that's seen Young Guns 2, it starts off, there's an old man that claims to be Billy the Kid.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah. Anyway,
so that was a real person. His name was Oliver Roberts. He was known as Brushy Bill Roberts is what he called himself. And he did that was a real person that came forward in the 1940s claiming to be Billy the Kid. And he's one of your more credible claimants, because so many people still to this day truly believe that Brushy Bill Roberts is Billy the Kid.
Yeah, I've seen it.
On the surface, it's very compelling. I'll just do a quick rundown. Brushy Bill Roberts had all the same scars as Billy the Kid. He knew things about the Lincoln County War that nobody could have possibly known unless they had participated in it. And there were 5 people that swore affidavits, signed affidavits, saying that Brushy Bill Roberts and 5 people that knew Billy the Kid said that Brushy Bill Roberts was Billy the Kid. And then you start digging into it a little bit further, and you find out it's all bullshit. There's no evidence Brushy Bill Roberts had any scars. The 5 people that said that he was
were
Billy
going
the Kid,
so well, and now you cut it all off.
the 5 people that said that Billy the Kid was Brushy Bill and Billy were one and the same. Most of those people did not ever know the historical Billy the Kid. One of them wasn't even born yet when Billy died. So how could they possibly know if Brushy Bill Roberts was Billy the Kid if they weren't alive? There were the best they could find were 2 old men who had lived in Lincoln when they were children. And even one of them initially said that Brushy Bill was not Billy the Kid. He was too young. So there's really no evidence. If you actually look into it, Brushy Bill was born in 1879. He was a toddler when Billy the Kid died. We know the names of his wives. We know the names of his parents. We know every job. He's on every census from 1880 to his death. He was never an outlaw, nothing like that. He's completely full of it.
So it's historical accurate that they put it in the movie.
Yeah, it's not historically accurate, right? In the Young Guns universe, Billy lived to be an old man. In real life, he was shot and killed in 1881. So because of the stories like the ones told by Brushy Bill Roberts, there's another guy named John Miller that some people think was Billy the Kid. He was in Arizona. There's always, I guess, been a little bit of a question. I say always. Starting in the 20th century, there was no question when Billy was killed. It was never doubted by anybody. Starting decades later, people started questioning whether or not he was actually killed. So there have been 2 prior attempts to exhume Billy the Kid's body. The first time was in 1961, I believe, when the town of Lincoln tried to have him reinterred to Lincoln. I think so they could get some of that tourist money and
visit the grave.
Right. And then the court said no. And then the same thing happened again in the early 2000s. This time it was a couple of sheriffs in New Mexico that they basically reopened the criminal investigation. The then governor, Bill Richardson, they had his full support. But once again, the court said no, we weren't going to allow him to be exhumed. And, a lot of people point to this as being a conspiracy in and of itself. The powers that be don't want you to dig up Billy the Kid because nobody's actually in his grave, or his death was a hoax and they don't want us to find out the truth. In all reality, what I discovered looking into it, the main reason they're not granting permission to dig up his grave is because, believe it or not, there are laws. We just can't get a backhoe and start digging up dead bodies, right? There has to be some sort of law involved with it. And one of the laws is you have to have permission from the next of kin. Now, with Billy the Kid has no known next of kin, but when Billy was buried, he was buried next to 2 of his buddies, Tom Folliard and Charlie Baldry. Okay, they were buried side by side, all 3 of these guys. They had died a few months prior to his death. Okay, now Billy's grave was initially marked with a cross, a wooden cross. The cross was stolen a few years later, and his grave remained unmarked for decades. The gravestone that he has now over his grave, if anybody's ever visited the Fort Sumner Cemetery, that was not added until, gosh, man, I'd have to look it up again, the 1930s or 1940s. So the reason they placed the stone where they placed it, there were some old timers still living at that time in Fort Sumner, and they basically walked out there and was like, yeah, he was buried over in this general direction. There's a great book on this. Yeah, well, there's a pretty good book titled Billy the Kid's Grave by David G. Thomas, where there was another, it goes all the way back to 1907, I believe, 1904, somewhere early 1900s. Fort Sumner is called Fort Sumner because at one point in time it was a military installation. So there were soldiers buried at Fort Sumner. Those soldiers were dug up in the early 1900s and reinterred in the state capital, Santa Fe. And some of the same old timers who pointed out where Billy was buried also made a map of the graveyard. It's now known as the Dudrow map. And at that time, Billy's grave was marked on the Dudrow map. Okay. And where his grave was marked on the Dudrow map is basically where his grave currently is. So I think there's a very good likelihood that he's buried in the direct vicinity of his current grave marker. The only question is, how close? Is he directly under it? Is he 3 feet over here?
How many
And
years before?
how do you dig him up without also digging up his 2 buddies?
Mm.
And in the case of Charlie Bowdry in particular, his family said they do not want their ancestors' grave disturbed. Now, that was one of the main things the courts pointed to by saying, because we cannot accurately pinpoint the exact location of his grave, therefore you can't dig him up without disturbing other remains, we're going to say no. You also have a problem of who are you going to compare the DNA to? Well, the logical conclusion would be his mother, Catherine, who was buried in Silver City. That's where it gets even more complicated. Her grave was reinterred a few years after she died, and where her grave currently is, there's hundreds of unmarked graves. And her headstone didn't arrive until decades after she was reinterred. So finding her body and then positively IDing her body without also disturbing other remains would probably be impossible. So that's the main hurdle. And then also there's the question of whether or not the DNA would still be viable. All of this to satisfy a handful of conspiracy theorists who just don't accept. When you get into the whole, like, you take Brushy Bill out of the equation, Billy the Kid's death was one of the more well-documented of the Old West. There was a coroner's jury, which at that time was almost like having a death certificate. There was historians have already identified over 40 eyewitnesses by name who saw Billy's dead body. There was a public wake. There was a public funeral. Like, as far as literally every primary source, he was killed at Fort Sumner in 1881 and buried in the Fort Sumner Cemetery.
All fabricated. He's still alive.
Yeah, he's still alive. In my heart, he is.
So, but that brings me to like what I want to wrap up with is that like Young Guns 2 was a great movie. And the story, and Charlie Bowdry's in that as well. So somehow he survived, right? And it brings me to the question of, fictional westerns. One of my favorite movies of all time. Would you guys consider Last of the Mohicans a western?
That's a hard one because it's so hard to say, man. I not really, but yes, if that makes sense. I wouldn't necessarily consider The Revenant to be a western,
right?
Sure. Last of the Mohicans kind of takes place before what we would consider classically to be the Old West. And it doesn't take place in the West. But I mean, I think we should call it whatever we want to a western at this point. That's kind of sort of my idea about it.
I like it, and I think it might be my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah.
One of the ones I grew up on that my dad loved was Dances with Wolves, obviously a fictional story. Yeah, I was asking you about Last of the Mohicans, one of my favorite movies. Are you a Last of the Mohicans fan?
I enjoy it. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I liked it, yeah.
Did you consider that a western? I mean, as far as like him integrating into, the Native American.
Yeah, it's got a lot of the themes, a lot of the same themes. You're talking about Last of the Mohicans, right? Or Dances with Wolves?
Dances with Wolves. They're both.
Yeah.
Dances
with Wolves, man. I really love that movie. Yeah, I'd say that's a western. Pretty by definition, I would say.
Yeah.
Dances with Wolves has a big problem. He's too short.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Because we want to see more. It's too short.
Oh yeah, isn't it a 3.5 hour movie or something?
It's a long movie, but it's still too short.
Yeah, it's an excellent movie though, and it gets me to the topic of fictional westerns and the upcoming Young Guns 3. What have you heard about Young Guns 3, and are you excited about it?
Yeah, I'm gonna be there opening day whenever it's in the theaters.
Same.
New casting or the old guys?
I think some of the old cast is in it, right?
Yeah, they're bringing back Emilio Estevez. I think Lou Diamond Phillips.
Wow.
So maybe. They are old guns now.
Yeah. From what I understand, the plot, like, in the Young Guns universe, Brushy Bill Roberts is Billy the Kid, right? So I think they're gonna, from what I understand, the plot's gonna take place sort of in New Mexico and northern Mexico with Pancho Villa.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy the Kid now is an older guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming living under an assumed name is going to help to sort of train up some fighters for Pancho Villa. That's what I've read.
Huh.
But yeah, I'll definitely be watching it.
I don't know when it comes out. Soon, right? Like this year,
I
or is
doubt
in-
it. I don't even know if they started filming yet.
Oh man, I'm super excited about that
Yeah, me too.
because I'll be there I'll be there on
Yeah.
day one too. Hopefully, we have some like badass like rock and roll and stuff like that. Because
Maybe Bon Jovi will be back, man.
oh man, that would be awesome. He did the
Yeah.
whole soundtrack for one, right? Did he do the whole soundtrack for
two?
two?
Two, yeah.
Two, not one, right?
Mm-hmm. As far as I know, he didn't do it for one. I don't know who did for one.
I don't remember off the
And
top of my head.
that brings me a question. Do you think that, talking about music, do you think the soundtrack is accurate to the times what we see? No, not at all.
Interestingly enough, Billy the Kid was a big fan of music, the real Billy the Kid. And there was one song in particular he was said to have liked. I want to say it was called Silver Wings or something like that. But it's crazy. You go back and you listen to some of these old songs, and it doesn't compare with what we have nowadays. But I mean, they didn't have the radio back then. They didn't have MP3s.
Sure. But I mean, the scenarios that we see in the saloons and
with like the twangy Western.
I'm talking about the music in the film, not the soundtrack, but the music in the film.
Okay, my bad. I am not a smart person, so
no, you're crushing it today.
I think I'm assuming. I've read accounts of there being pianos in saloons. One thing I will say is your average saloon in the Wild West was nowhere near as big as what you see in the TV shows or movies.
Mm-hmm.
They were pretty tiny, man. I mean, I'm talking almost like a hallway in a home in some cases.
Right.
I also am not aware of them having like the batwing doors that you just, the swinging doors when you walk in and out. I think that went until a little bit later on.
Uh-huh.
And in a lot of these places, the saloon was a tent. Especially in your boomtowns, before they actually could build an actual wooden structure, they would just have a big tent where they put up a bench and sell liquor, and the ladies were in the back.
That reminds me of
the ladies were in the back.
That reminds me of a question I wanted to ask earlier. Have you done a video or done any research on like, laudanum or opioids in general in the Old West? Was it really like the way they portrayed it as being pervasive and a huge problem?
I haven't done an episode on that yet. I'm planning on it. I want to do like all the drugs. Like I want to do like marijuana in the Old West and all that type of stuff. But as far as that goes, all I can speak on is what I've personally seen doing my research. And it is something that comes up from time to time. It wasn't like nowadays where there weren't all the strict laws about prescriptions and that type of stuff. You just, in a lot of cases, sometimes you could buy this stuff in stores. I mean, remember,
right?
People were putting cocaine and rattlesnake heads and stuff and calling it a cure for everything that ails you. So there was a lot of stuff that probably you wouldn't want to be taking if you were sick, but
called drugstores.
Yeah, drugstores. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, think about what do they give you now if you have an operation? Morphine. That's heroin, right?
Yeah.
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 It's a kind of heroin. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an opioid. Yeah. So, you mentioned you want to do a video on drugs and whatnot in the Wild West. What other things, like ideas do you have that we can expect, to pop up in the future? Like, I probably got a lot you want to do. What can we expect?
Well, I'm getting ready to do. I hate to say this because I always end up changing my mind, but I'm planning on doing a Wyatt Earp series very soon. I'm a lot of what I do, man. I just fly by the seat of my pants, but sometimes when I do a series like on somebody like Wyatt Earp or Doc Holliday, it takes a little bit more planning.
It would, yeah, especially where people are very protective of the story. And
there's a episode I've been wanting to do for a very long time now, covering one of the largest mass hangings in the United States, in Gainesville, Texas. There were some. This was during the Civil War. A bunch of people were considered to be Union sympathizers, and they were basically executed. I want to cover that. I've still got to cover Butch Cassidy. I've got a lot of stuff to cover, man. I'm going to be talking about the Alamo, the Texas Revolution. I'm going to be talking about Red Cloud's War. I'm going to be talking about the Battle of Little Bighorn. So I've still got a lot of ground to cover. Geronimo, the Apache Wars, the Apache Kid. What else, man? I've got a list a mile long of stuff I want to talk about. And, I'm also going to be sort of branching out into what may not necessarily be considered Old West history. Like, I'd like to do a series on Daniel Boone, and he wasn't really an Old West kind of guy. I'd like to do some more modern history. So I will be definitely branching out. Do what?
Bootlegging would be a good
upgrade. Well, I did. You may be interested in this because we were talking about Italy earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I did an episode on a guy named Two Gun Hart a while back. He was a prohibition agent during the bootlegging era, a very effective prohibition agent. And he was kind of weird because he wanted to be a cowboy. So this is the prohibition gangster bootlegging days, but he had the big hat. He rode horses. He carried 6-shooters. Do you know what his real name was? Vincenzo Capone.
Oh.
Any guesses as to who his brother was?
Al?
Al Capone's brother was a prohibition agent that carried around 6-shooters and rode horses and wanted to be a cowboy. Yeah.
That's incredible. I'd like to see a movie about that. He actually spent a lot of
time working on Indian reservations. So he was sort of like enamored with the Native American culture as well.
What kind of modern history are you trying to do? And I got about 7 minutes. So.
7 minutes, dude. Wherever my curiosity takes me, honestly. The most modern I've ever done so far, I covered a guy named Claude Dallas who's still alive.
Okay.
Claude Dallas. This was something that a lot of listeners requested I cover. He's known in some circles as the last mountain man. He was a fur trapper in Nevada. He ended up killing a couple of game wardens in Idaho. And he was at one point in time like on the FBI's top 10 most wanted. Went to prison. He's out now, and he's out there somewhere. Nobody really knows where he's at, but he's still alive. But that's the most modern I've covered.
Are you thinking like World War II or any war stuff?
Yeah. I did cover a guy from World War II a long time ago. I don't know if it's available to the public anymore, but there was a guy named Joseph Medicine Crow. He served in the World War II in the Army, and he is known as the last war chief of the Crow Nation. The Crow tribe had very specific markers you had to hit to be considered a war chief. Mm-hmm. You had to count coup on your enemy. You had to steal enemy horses. Mm-hmm. He met all these requirements during World War II. This dude counted coup on Nazis. He stole Nazi horses. He led his own raids, and he met all the requirements to be a certified war chief of the Crow. And then when he came back home, he got really into education. He ended up getting several degrees and teaching history. Really inspiring guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So there's so much like shit that you can cover, and that's why I feel like I appreciate you saying like I don't want to say specifically I might do this next because it sounds like you're just like there's so much to cover and your hands are in so many different things. Josh, I love your channel. Okay, I don't normally do this on podcasts, but like I was super excited for today because number one, we're covering something different than I normally cover, and number two, it's something that's near and dear to my heart and me growing up. And so I just wanted to thank you, man, for responding to my email. I don't know if you get a bunch of emails or whatever, why you decided to come on my show, but I really, really appreciate it, dude.
I appreciate you having me, man. Appreciate you inviting me. My honor.
Excellent. And maybe down the line after you do some more videos, we can cover some of your other topics as well. Yeah. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, let me know, man. I had fun, and I'm a nobody, dude. It's not like I'm some sort of famous person. So
you're famous to me, dude. I watched you like literally like hours and hours worth. So you're famous to me, brother.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ricardo, you got anything else for Josh?
No, I just learned a lot.
Same.
questions that probably I had for so many years, but
Yeah.
didn't even know how to make the questions, right? And you answer a lot of them. So thank you very much. And you were a wealth of information on this. You were citing your friend, but you are also a wealth of information on this.
Thanks, man. I had fun. It's a good conversation.
You said it before we went live, or not live, but you said you were you don't speak well. You usually do this like off a script, brother. You crushed it. You were pulling names out of all over the place, and so hey, thank you for joining the multiverse, Josh. Looking forward to dropping this episode in a couple weeks, and we'll be in touch. Are you anywhere on social media that we can link below, or you can tell people where to find you? It's just the Wild West Extravaganza.
Yeah, just I got a website, wildwestextra.com, and the Wild West Extravaganza podcast is available on YouTube or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the places. I have a free newsletter where I talk about a lot of this stuff, wildwestnewsletter.com. And that's pretty much it.
All right, man. You have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
It was a pleasure.
All right.
Subscribe to Dave's Multiverse on YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble today.